Business organisations in this country have said consistently to government, we need the certainty of knowing what a carbon price is.
Prime Minister, you can give the certainty to the business community, and I've said this over and over again, by saying there'll be no carbon tax, which you said during the election. Do you accept the fact that you've stolen an election with a false promise?
Oh, Alan, what a load of nonsense. The Australian people voted for the parliament that I am sitting in here today. I'm sitting in Parliament House. I sat in the House of Representatives yesterday. Australians voted for the people sitting in that House of Representatives.
149 of them.
And when you look at the people sitting in that House of Representatives, the Labor representatives have consistently said to the Australian people, you remember the debates about the carbon pollution reduction scheme, we need to price carbon. I am working with others in the Parliament of goodwill who also believe that
Julia,
we need to price carbon.
We talked about the emissions trading scheme off-air, didn't we, Julia? You remember that?
I've got no idea what you're referring to, Alan, so if you're going to try and make some allegation, get out there and make it. If you haven't got the guts to make it, then don't refer to it.
I've certainly got the guts to make it. I told you in a discussion we had here that emissions trading scheme proposal was going to bury Kevin Rudd and your government. I told you that off-air, and I said you'd be unwise off-air to be part of that debate. I told you that, and the emissions trading scheme buried Kevin Rudd, and this will bury you.
Alan, I'm not responsible for the statements you make off-air. I'm responsible for the statements I make on air and off air. And Alan, you would be aware from discussions I've had with you on air and off air that I have always supported pricing carbon using a market-based mechanism.
Why did you say that
because that is the most efficient thing to do. If you look across the election statements, you will see me saying those things. When you look at the Parliament, Alan, if I can finish, when you look at the Parliament that Australians voted for, they voted for Labor members. Voted, Alan, if you can let me finish my sentence, they voted for Labor members committed to pricing carbon. They voted for some independent and a Green member, many of whom are also committed to pricing carbon. I believe in pricing carbon. It's the right thing to do for this country's future. I am not going to risk Australian jobs in the future. I am going to get on with doing this, and I will work with people of goodwill voted for by the Australian people to get it done.
149 people and 50 in the Parliament. There's only one Greens member.
Why did you say... have you seen today's newspapers and that Mal Washer, a Liberal member, has said we need to price carbon? Have you ever read any of the things that Malcolm Turnbull, the Liberal member for Wentworth, has said about pricing carbon? How can you say to your listeners that the people who sit in the Parliament, apart from one, are not committed to or interested in pricing carbon? You could get a Liberal member, Malcolm Turnbull, on this show following me right now, and he would say that we need as a nation to price carbon.
I'm sure he would.
So don't try and mislead the Australian people, Alan, on the positions of people in the Parliament.
Malcolm Turnbull was ditched as the leader of the Liberal Party.
And he believes in pricing carbon.
Because of pricing
Mal
carbon.
Washer believes in pricing carbon. He was ditched. Half of Tony Abbott's backbench believes in pricing carbon. And Tony Abbott himself is on record as saying a carbon tax is the simplest way of pricing carbon.
All of that we could accept. All of that.
Well, all of that's true, Alan.
Whoa. If it's true, why then, before the election, listen, why did you say this?
There will be no carbon tax under the government I lead.
Why did you say that?
We, in the election campaign, were talking about climate change, pricing carbon. What are the mechanisms to do it?
Why did you say that?
There are various mechanisms to do it, and I was answering a question dealing with all of that. Alan, I didn't want to get into any word games yesterday. The mechanism I am now advocating to the Australian people is a market-based mechanism. Ultimately, the market will set the price of carbon.
Why did you say that, Julia?
There will be a fixed price in the meantime. That is effectively like a tax, and I just wanted to be straightforward about it. But we will go to a market-based mechanism, which is what I talked about in the election campaign.
Why did you say... No, hang on.
Well, I've just explained it to you, Alan.
Why did you say there'll be no carbon tax under the government?
Well, I've just explained it to you, and
I rule out a carbon tax.
You may not have been listening because you were too busy to interrupt.
No, I don't interrupt.
I've just explained it to you, Alan.
I rule out a carbon tax.
The Australian people voted, and they voted for this Parliament, and we're getting on with the job of pricing carbon.
All of that would be accepted by the electorate. and they wouldn't be as angry as they are today were it not for the fact that you said there will be no carbon tax under the government I lead. You said I rule out a carbon tax. And Wayne Swan, your deputy, I just sort of so to understand, Wayne Swan said this, your deputy.
Now, it's not possible that we're bringing in a carbon tax. That is an hysterically inaccurate claim being made by the coalition.
What's your response to that?
What my response to that is, Alan, is I speak on a lot of radio shows, and I often get told that people who commentate on those radio shows like you somehow know what the electorate's thinking. I did a lot of radio immediately after I announced the flood levy, and I had people saying to me, the Australian community hate it, they'll never accept it, no one will ever pay it, this will destroy your government, how could you make such an error? And I patiently and methodically said, well, I reckon Australians are people of goodwill and common sense, and I reckon they'll come to accept this. And I think on the flood levy, I've been proved right, Alan. No, and I understand, having announced a carbon price mechanism yesterday, we'll get the same reaction, and it'll be fast and furious, and it'll be a difficult debate, and people will do television polls and phone-in polls and take talk back and all the rest of it, and people will quickly conclude that, somehow this is a grave error of judgment by me. I do not accept that. I believe I will patiently and methodically explain to the Australian people this is the right thing to do. People want us to act on climate change. People want a clean energy future. They'll want the jobs of the future. They won't want this nation left behind. That's what I'm going to deliver, and I'll be out there explaining it to the Australian people.
Can I just make one final point? Because you're the Prime Minister, and I believe you're entitled to be heard, and I've tried to allow that to happen today. I'm concerned about the commitments that you gave before the election, but we've covered that ground. Could I just say, though, on the flood levy, you made a very specific statement that you'd have an issue of flood levy. You thought the damage, you quoted $5.6 billion, and you said, and I'll pay for the other stuff by cutting certain government programs. That's what you said to everybody. That's what I'm going to do. Flood levy, and everyone said, righto, $5.6 billion. They said, righto, well, flood levy, I mightn't agree, but she's told us what she's going to do. She's going to pay for this here, 1.8, and then she's going to cut programs. Then when the Greens found out that some of those programs were Greens programs, you immediately did a double somersault like Esther Williams and said, we'll reinstate $500 million of Greens programs. In other words, what I said last week's not true. I'm going to change my mind now.
Alan, what you've just said to your listeners is completely untrue. Either you misunderstand what happened or you are trying to deceive.
We don't try to deceive.
Well, let's get your listeners the facts then, because what you've just told them is not the truth.
You reinstated Greens programs that you said you were going to cut.
Let me give people the truth, or you're going to insist on your lie.
You've had a fair go.
The truth.
Did you reinstate Greens programs that you said you would cut?
Alan, I'll finish my sentence, thank you. The truth, Alan, is I obviously talked to members of the Parliament. We made an adjustment to the cutbacks of less than 3%. Less than 3%, Alan.
About $500 million.
That is
half a billion.
Did you just say $500 million?
$500 million.
Completely untrue.
What, try 350? Tell me how many million.
That is a lie.
Tell me how many million.
It was an adjustment of $150 million, less than 3%. You are trying to deceive your listeners with the wrong figure. No, that is the wrong thing to do, Alan. You shouldn't treat your listeners like that.
I think it's not 150, but even if it were...
Well, it is, Alan.
Even
maths
if it were...
is maths. Facts are facts, and you can't distort them.
No, don't go to the facts are facts. I'm just simply saying your credibility...
Less than 3%, Alan.
When your credibility, you stood up and said, this is how we pay for it. But when the Greens got a bit dirty... You said, we've got to get
Alan,
this thing through.
What a load of nonsense. I needed to work with people to get the flood levy through because Mr Abbott irresponsibly, completely irresponsibly, putting the politics first, said he wouldn't vote for it. In the past, he's never seen a levy he didn't like. He loves levies. He went to the election with a $6 billion levy that he wanted to put on the shoulders of Australian business. But when it came to having a levy to rebuild Queensland and around the nation, because he put his political interest in front of the national interest, he opposed it. In those circumstances, I did need to talk to other members of Parliament to get the flood levy through, and we made an adjustment of less than 3% in the package. If Mr Abbott had put the nation's interest first rather than his perceived political interest, we would not be in that position. And if Mr Abbott comes on your show and talks about climate change, you may want to ask him, Alan, why he said that a carbon tax was the simplest way of pricing carbon, and why he's walking away from that and engaging in a hysterical and hollow fear campaign today without any plans for the nation's future.
Okay, one final thing. You mentioned Bill Gates yesterday.
Yes, I did.
And you said the reason he's rich today is that he got in on the change.
Correct.
Now, do you understand that Bill Gates invented stuff that would make him money? You're inventing a tax that will cost us money.
What I'm doing, Alan, is I am pricing carbon to drive innovation and to create a low-pollution, clean tech future. There are lots of smart Australians out there, and what they will do is they will invent the low-pollution, clean energy products of the future, and they'll make a fortune out of it, and that's fantastic, because so will the nation, and we'll have jobs here. I want to see as many Bill Gates-style people in this country as possible making their living creating the products of the future, low pollution, the products the world will want to buy. What I don't want to see is that young Australians get left behind and they don't have the jobs of the future whilst people in other countries do.
Okay. Thank you for your time, and you're always welcome. It's just that sometimes we can't get answers from your office. But any time, as you were in opposition, so too in government, you're welcome to present your views.